I'm just going to stop sharing my screen now. I think everybody has joined us. Welcome to the NAPLE Forum 2021. My name is Stuart Hamilton. I'm the Head of Libraries Development at the Local Government Management Agency in Ireland, and I'm also the current President of NAPLE, the National Authorities on Public Libraries in Europe. And it's great to have you all here today. Before I go any further, we're going to be recording this event. I'm sure you're all completely familiar with this process now. But for those of you that do not wish to be recorded, thanks for coming along for these couple of minutes. And you can always catch up with the recording later. But hopefully you're all in good shape for the recording. So Alice, if you want to begin the recording, we'll start the session proper. So thanks again, everybody, for coming along. The NAPLE Forum 2021 is now open. We've got a great number of participants today. We're well over 150 already. And I hope for the next couple of hours, we're going to be having some interesting discussions on what's coming around the corner for public libraries in Europe. For those of you who don't know NAPLE, NAPLE is the National Authorities on Public Libraries in Europe. Our website is at naple.eu, and we have 23 members across Europe in both EU and non-EU countries. So we're an international non-governmental association which is pursuing the interests of the national authorities for public libraries in Europe. And we look at things like principles and strategies for public library policies. The membership of NAPLE is open to all national public library authorities, or the kind of nearest equivalent. And the sorts of members that you find in NAPLE could be associations, national libraries, ministries, or national or state agencies for libraries, or even library authorities. And we are looking for new members. So if you think that you might fit the bill, joining NAPLE is free of charge and gets you access to some amazing professionals from all over Europe for information sharing. The Forum 2021 is actually being held with support from the Portuguese presidency of the European Union, which was arranged for us by our dear colleague Bruno Heras, who unfortunately can't join us today due to ill health. But we do want to say thank you for Bruno's work and for the Portuguese government for letting us kind of operate under their auspices for this forum. And you know, I'm sure we'd all rather be in Portugal, but for now, I think maybe you could imagine that you're in Portugal and we're all together. So look, a bit of housekeeping before we really get into things. Please take a moment to identify your nearest fire exit so that you may exit your own building safely. We do have everybody on mute, and at the times during the event where we would take questions, for example, then you'll be able to unmute yourself. If you accidentally unmute yourself, you may be called by me to go back into mute hiding. We will really be trying to make great use of the chat function, which I'm sure you're all completely familiar with after months of Zoom and Teams meetings. But I'd strongly encourage you to use the chat today because you know, it's an opportunity to share comments from your perspective at the appropriate times, to ask questions of our speakers and our panelists. And it's a great opportunity to really get to know each other. And I'm going to kind of ask you to do something right at the beginning here. I'm speaking to you from Mayo in the west of Ireland, and I can tell you that it's absolutely raining cats and dogs here. It's terrible weather, the wind is howling, and I'm kind of interested to know who we all are. So I might ask you kindly if you could enter who you are, where you're coming from, and what the weather's like where you are in the chat. And then right at the end, we'll see if we can kind of aggregate the weather in Europe today. So do crack on with that and we'll see what sort of weather we've got. So look, our agenda today is full of some really great speakers. We're going to start with Christian Lauersen, who's the Director of Libraries and Citizen Services in Roskilde in Denmark. We're going to follow Christian's keynote, which I'll introduce in a moment, with a panel discussion featuring some of Europe's library leaders, where we're going to look at kind of what's coming up over the horizon for public libraries in Europe over the next year or so. And we're going to finish with a little bit of interaction. We're going to probably sacrifice ourselves on the altar of the gods of technology, because it's almost inevitably going to go wrong. But we're going to try a Menti poll to see what you all think of how libraries are looking in the kind of post-COVID environment in Europe. So we've got, 2 hours, best of 2 hours set aside. We'll see how we do with the time. We'll see how engaged everybody is, but we'll be aiming to finish up by 3 o'clock CET. Now, all of the speaker biographies today and links to some of Christian's work can be found on the NAPLE.eu web pages, where you can link to the forum page. So if you want a little bit more information about our speakers, you can go there. Now, look, before we do get to Christian, I do want to say just a couple of words about where we, NAPLE, our members, our extended network, finds ourselves in May 2021. It's been a pretty interesting year, I'd say, for NAPLE members. And where we found ourselves at the beginning of 2020 was basically putting together a new set of statutes for NAPLE, the organisation, and trying to work out how we might handle a work plan for the period 2020 and beyond. We had a new board together, and I was lucky enough to come in as president of the organisation, and we were looking into the future with zero sign of COVID on the horizon at that point. And then, of course, from March next year, everything changed. And for NAPLE, it's been really a very interesting time, because we moved very quickly to having regular meetings of the NAPLE members, and we began sharing information about what was happening in our countries. And obviously we did all of that online, but we found that we formed a very effective support network very quickly. We began to develop a shared spreadsheet, which enabled us to report back on what was happening in several areas of our services during COVID. And this was extremely useful for all of us as we began to prepare our response. I do feel that what's happened during COVID has been very helpful for organisations like NAPLE to be able to share this information with our peers, to hear how people are tackling challenges, to work out what is working and what isn't. And we produced 2 reports looking at the initial phases of COVID in Europe's public libraries, which you can find on our website, looking at the period up to April and then from May to July last year, which are really interesting reading and gives you updates from sort of nearly 20 countries. But of course, now we've reached a point in the pandemic where we're finally looking to the future, or at least we hope we are. Here in Ireland, some of you may or may not know, but we have a national public library system here. We have 326 public library branches. And throughout the pandemic, the staff here have been going beyond the call of duty to deliver online programming, providing online resources, home delivery services, the sorts of things you'll all be very familiar with in your own countries and the sorts of responses that you all made. And actually, a couple of weeks ago on May the 10th, we reopened our doors for the first time in a long time and let people back in to start browsing the shelves, to using our photocopiers and our scanners. And we can do some small outdoor events at this point. What we're looking forward to is gradually reopening our services over the summer to get back to what was normal before. But I guess we're all very interested in what's next for the profession, for the sector. What's going to change? What are we going to keep from the last 12 months? What do we not want to go back to? For me at least, how do we continue to prove our relevance and our worth once we've moved beyond the pandemic? How are we going to show the impact of the public library sector in the kind of brave new world? And that's what I think we should start by thinking about today. And that's why we're super pleased to have with us to kick off our keynote speaker, Christian Lauersen. As I mentioned, he's the Director of Libraries and Citizen Services in Roskilde Municipality in Denmark. He's truly passionate about libraries. He's also truly passionate about socks, which you'll know if you follow him on social media. And he's one of the co-founders of Library Planet, which is a crowdsourced travel guide to libraries, which I encourage you all to check out at libraryplanet.net. And he's recently been thinking a lot about impact, and particularly the impact of public libraries in Denmark. And we've asked him to come along here to talk about this work because it's recently been translated into English, which gives it a broader audience. and because his focus is something that I think we should all be thinking about right now. So we're going to hear what Christian has to say, and then we're going to open up the floor for questions from the audience. But again, I would strongly encourage you to use that chat function as we go along. If you like what you're hearing, or if you've got different experiences, do throw something in. And we can also pull your questions together with our moderators to ask them to Christian at the end. Now, Christian does have a bit of a cold, so I'm going to ask you all to be rather gentle with him. I'm sure he'll tell us more about that. But Christian, I'm going to hand over to you. You can unmute yourself, and you should be able to start sharing the screen at your own leisure. So over to you, Christian. We're really, really happy to have you with us.
Thank you, Stuart. I'm really happy to be here. It's not a bit of a cold, it's a gigantic cold. So my throat is a mess, but inside my body, I feel amazing to be here with you today. And I'm sure that we get through it. I have some hot tea and stuff around me, so it will all be good. I will share my screen with you. I hope you can see it now.
It's coming. It's good.
It's good. Perfect. So thank you for inviting me to talk about this study we've done on the impact and value of public libraries in Denmark. The agenda is pretty simple. I will talk about the aim and the ambition of this work. Then I will talk a little bit about the method and the design we used to put it together. I will talk about the main results we found, and I will at the end talk about some of the perspectives that I see in how this work can be used. And to start with the ambition, I truly believe that how we talk about things matters. I think it matters a lot. The words we use, the pictures we use to describe institution, functions, services, cities, environments, communities, and so on. It matters. It shapes us. It puts ideas and pictures in our heads. It can move budgets. It can move votes, and so on. And I've always been very focused and interested in how we talk about libraries in general and public libraries in specifics. And I guess you all know, many of you know the story about John F. Kennedy visiting the NASA facilities in 1961, and he has a camera crew, press crew with him, and he meets this janitor on the hallway, brooming the floors, and he's being all presidential, you know, hanging out with the main man, and he stops by him and says, "So, my good man, what do you do here?" And the janitor looks at him and he says, "I'm helping us putting man to the moon." And that is, to me, just a great story on how we can, you know, frame things differently and how it matters what we say. He could also just have said, "What do you think I'm doing? I'm brooming the floor." But he used to put himself in a bigger picture and found himself being able to communicate that in a very cool way, I think. So that is a great example that, you know, both the brooming and the putting the man to the moon is correct answers, but they create very different ambitions and very different pictures. And I think it's very interesting how we talk about public libraries in general, and also in, you know, the context of the pandemic. Is it we are opening our houses so you can borrow books again? Or is it now we have an opportunity to face our communities and work with free and equal access to information, to knowledge, to fight loneliness or help fight loneliness, and foster communities and creation in wherever we are? You know, there's a difference between how we talk about it. And I have some examples on how we in general talk about it in Denmark. Now, the examples are not from Denmark because I wanted to put them in English, but they're still symbolizing the same thing. And I just want to remind you, this is a study in Danish context. It might look different from your parts. One of the, you know, main voices in the language about public libraries in Denmark is headlines like this: "Library footfall down 80% on last year." This is another one: "Library use falling sharply, study shows." And sometimes they are also more positive. I mean, Corona is not positive, but this is a headline showing that the lending of e-materials is increasing during lockdown. Obvious. So that is a voice focusing on the use of libraries, which is obvious. Key figures of libraries are extremely important to us, and I use it a lot myself. Then there's some other voices. I could call them opinion makers, sometimes experts, people, individuals who has a meaning about public libraries. This is a guy called 𝗪𝗵𝘁𝗵𝗿, who in the reopening of libraries is wondering about, do we really need those libraries? Wasn't it just okay that they were closed for a while? Did we really need them? And he's putting a piece out about that, which I think is, I don't agree with him, but basically I think it's welcomed that people has opinion about libraries, and especially people who are not within library professionals. It would be devastating for us if nobody would go out into the media and talk about libraries outside the sector. It's only showing me that we are relevant to some point. It could also be a different take. This is the really great 𝗪𝗁𝗁𝗿. Some of you might know her, who is putting a different take on libraries and lockdown, and then having a great piece in the Guardian on why lockdown was the plot twist that libraries needed. So this is individuals, library professional, opinion makers, politicians, experts of culture, journalists, so on, who is sharing opinions on libraries. And then we have things like this. It's you can see reports and helpful studies and toolkits and so on from our professional bodies. This is from Libraries Connected, great piece, Libraries in the Pandemic, Evolving Service to Meet Local Needs. Something that can inspire us, and we can use it to move on into what we're working on. The shared thing about these three examples, the one focusing on the use of libraries, the individual opinions from library professional, politicians, and so on, and the ones that come from our professional bodies, is that there's missing some really crucial and important point and voice, and that is the citizens of the communities that we serve. And that is, to my opinion, at least in Danish context, crucial to find that voice, to actually put that at the center of the discussion of the public library and the role and the impact it has in our communities now and in the future. So, and that has been the ambition with this work, to actually start with the citizens, start with the individuals, and move on from there to talk about the actual impact it has on people's lives. New public management, which you can say that the focusing on numbers, which are extremely huge in Denmark, as a platform for talking about, is it going good or bad for the libraries? If the numbers go up, really great. Going down, not so great. It's welcoming, but it's not the whole picture. And we wanted to expand the picture and expand that arena in which we are talking about the public library, so we have more insights, and we want to go out from the spreadsheets, not to ignore the spreadsheet, but to fill out the spreadsheets and the surroundings by putting actual people at the center of it. This is a quote from our study, from a boy talking about why he's going to the public library. And he says, I come here to check whether anyone I know is around. I come here every day instead of going home to an empty house. And if that boy is visiting the library, you will say 50 times a year. That's 50 counts in the spreadsheet. But you can't see that, what he's telling us here from the spreadsheet. You can see that meaning from him as an individual in our community, and how it reflects our community, and how it affects his life to have a library in his life from a spreadsheet and from the numbers that we are counting. So I think it's extremely important to expand that understanding of libraries by putting people at the center of it. Sorry, I need to grab some tea. Ginger tea, amazing. Okay, so put it out. Library statistics, use it a lot, and I love statistics and data to work with the libraries that I have. But it says something basically about the use of libraries, and not necessarily something about the value and the impact of libraries. So what I thought, or we thought, was that we needed a new language for the value of libraries and what that means to citizens and societies and communities. And that is the ambition of this study, basically. A little bit about the method and the design we used. I could talk a lot about this. Due to the time, I have scaled it down a bit. Feel free to ask me anytime after this at another point about the method and so on, because I think it's important to understand, to actually be critical about talking about this, and also be critical about the results at some point. Our main take comes from the Cultural Value Project from 2016, which have this wonderful ambition and thought, to my opinion, by starting, to talk about the impact of culture and arts by the individual experience, and then, expand it from there. Many times we start with, we have art and we have culture in societies and institution of that and people of that, pieces of that. And then we move into discussion, how can that affect public health? How can that affect our well-being, urban life, regional growth, tourism, and so on? And we are, jumping the very people that we are using it for, the actual citizens that are meeting that art, that culture, and so on. And the project, which is, I will very much recommend you to read it. It's you can call it a meta review of 50 other reviews about the impact of culture to people. And what the researchers found across these 50 studies about cultural impact is that there is 4 dimensions of cultural impact to individuals and societies. The first one, I could use an example. It could be me and Stuart going to the movies, if they open again, and see the new Danish movie 𝗪𝗏 Another Round, which is about four friends in the middle of the life who is experiencing about being a little bit drunk all the time to just feel better. That one glass of red wine just to lift up their workday because they're all a bit miserable. And me and Stuart are sitting in the movies, and we are probably having an emotional experience by watching this movie. I seen it, and I had a very emotional experience. I had an uncle who died of alcoholism many years ago, and it took me back to that place, and it took me back to him. I haven't thought about him in years, and it also, and that is what's so great about cultural and art, to be looking at a picture, to be listening to music, to be reading a book. It moves us, it makes us angry, it makes us happy, it makes us excited, it makes us passionate. It can really, really awakens feelings in us. And that is, going through life without feeling anything is, to me, the worst nightmare of any kind. Even though I sometimes, get frustrated or angry, it makes me feel that I'm alive, and art and culture are great at that. It could also, hold an intellectual impact for me and Stuart towards that movie. It could be reflecting on our own relationship with alcohol or our friends, or it could be, being a man in the middle of the life, and your relationship with your friends, and how you go about that, and stuff like that. So it creates conversations and reflections to meet culture. And then of course there's a creative spark. I'm not sure that I don't know Stuart that well. I'm not sure we will do the same experience to be creative that way, but it could be other. It could be afterwards we might go to a concert and we wanted to start a band together, a library band or something like that. So meeting culture, going to concerts, seeing movies, reading books, it sparks creativity. It wants us to do something on our own. And then the last one, which I think is extremely important, is the social dimension of us meeting culture and art. It's I'm pretty sure that Stuart and I would go out after seeing the movie and have a beer or something at a restaurant, and we would bond and we'd talk about it. Maybe some of us would go to work the day after, and we will stop by the coffee machine and we will have a conversation about the movie. We all know the feeling of going to a concert and just standing there in the middle of the crowd and having this great experience. And you might have lost your friend in the crowd, but you're still feeling this togetherness and belonging because everybody is there and experience this right now. So that is, that is the 4th dimension of cultural impact that this study shows. And we totally bought that. And we have built the scaffold for the method and for this study around that, accepting that is what basically, on a higher note, what cultural and art gives to us as individuals. And then we wanted to start with the individual experience, and the data that we have used is both quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative, we have done 1,509 questionnaire surveys on a random sample across Denmark, ranging from 16 to 90 years old, men and women, both library users and non-library users, which was important to us to also cover the aspect of non-users, or people who haven't used libraries in a while. That is, they also have an opinion about libraries, and they also might think that libraries have an impact and value for them, even though they haven't used them for a while. And then qualitative 40 studies on site on a bigger library and a smaller branch library, with interviews of actually users in a library situation and observation studies. And then just briefly about what we have talked to citizens about to convert or to get a grasp of the impact and value. We were very much, thinking about how can we talk to actually normal people using or maybe not using libraries so it makes sense to them, and so we can, actually have some valid data to build up around pointing and some impact and value. And we decided that we need to narrow it down. We couldn't talk about every aspect of the library. We have to talk about, for this kind of study, we have to talk to people about something that we thought they would recognize about a library. And that was the collection, both the physical and the digital collection. It's the programs, activities, workshops that libraries do, the physical facilities, the library rooms, the study spaces, the cafe, the makerspace, or whatever. And then very important to me, the guidance from the staff, actually to ask what does it mean to have a library worker in your life, and to be able to get help to reading suggestions and so on. So that is what we have been asking into, and that is important to understand, I think, because this is not the whole story about libraries, obvious. We haven't digged into school library collaboration, for instance, collaboration with museums, or when libraries leave their houses and go into society and do different kind of collaboration and stuff out there. We couldn't ask them about that. That is another study. So that is, how we framed what we talked about. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the main result. There's a lot of data and a lot of result, very interesting stuff. This is just the main thing. The first thing is that the citizens of Denmark sees the library as a haven in everyday life, where they find room for contemplation and where they can take time for the self and for each other. It's a little bit different how they use this haven. Some use it on their own, come down, read a newspaper, have a cup of coffee, find a good book, go home, something like that. Some use it with the family, a study group, or something like that. It's what some years ago you would probably call it the third place, I guess. We all have our private place, our home, our families, or whatever, and then many people have a second place. Could be work, could be a study, or something like that. This is a place in between that, where you can find some room from not being at home or not being at work, and where you can be together with the community by yourself or with others. Important to the citizens of Denmark. Then there is a perspective, then there's an impact that's pointing of the public libraries to citizens of Denmark is a credible communicator of knowledge, and it gives the citizens enlightenment and a critical perspective on life. It's actually very much back to, why we even, have public libraries in Europe, and the, the very dawn of enlightenment, that you can come to a library, you can go to a program, you can read a book, you can talk to fellow citizens or a librarian, and you can get a certain perspective on your life, and not just a perspective, but also a critical perspective. And I will touch base on it just a bit later, but I think this is very important to put in context of the world we're living in, with parallel universes on social medias, fake news and misinformation, and so on. And I think to have an impact where you can get a critical perspective from a credible source is extremely important in 2021 and so on. Then there is an impact pointing at the public library is a space where citizens experience togetherness and community, and it could be alone and it could be with others, and where they experience that the materials and the facilities that we have in libraries are common property without financial barriers. And I always thought that public libraries was forces of social good, fostering strong community. But I never really thought about the last one, that the things that we share in a community, it's our books, it's our houses, it's our library workers, it's our programs, it's something that we share as a community, can be, you know, can make us feel connected and that we have something to share. And around 80% of parents in the study points out that it's important that their kids grow up in a society where we have, you know, common property that we share together. They think that common property is healthy for future citizens and for the kids to experience, because that is something we share and something that we care about, and it's something that connects us. And then there is a finding that points at the impact going on creativity and the public library as a source of inspiration that stimulates imagination and helps motivate citizens to try out new stuff. It might not be that you learn everything at the library, at a program or from a book, but you get inspired to learn new stuff. You might go to a program on playing ukulele or talk about how we all can work and do our share to make a better climate. And you get inspired and you go out into the world, or you go home and you seek more information and more communities around this certain topic, and go on from there. So it's not that you learn everything from the library, but you get inspired. Then there's a finding about the staff, which I find really significant and really important to 𝗧𝗸𝗿𝗁. Citizens in Denmark find that help from the staff at public libraries holds quite some significant impact, and that staff is a human face of the library and serves for many as a relational point of reference in local communities. I think that is very much in smaller branch libraries where you have the same staff on duty on many days, and maybe not that significant on bigger libraries in bigger cities. But it's not showing that you drink coffee with your librarian or library worker. It shows that you have a familiar face in your community, and that library worker might know what you like to read, and might just, you know, take out some books for the next time you are there and hand them to you. And it's also really important for them that there's something in the municipality or community that can help you without you being a number in a queue, which is, you know, normal municipality, you know, whereabouts. You pick a number and then you stand in a queue and then you get a service. You can walk in to a library and you can get help. That is important. And they point out that help with literature, reading, and information seeking is especially relevant to citizens, which I'm happy, because that is what we are really great at. Then the last main finding is that the public library to citizens of Denmark is a place of trust, and a place where you can trust what you see and what you hear, and connected with the perspective. I just find that, and you know, connected with the world we are living in right now, I just find that to be extremely impactful. I'll come back to that in just a minute. So this is, you know, we put out the report. The work is done from that. We have some findings, we have some methods and stuff, but that is just halfway to me. I think, you know, reports and so on have a certain lifespan, and then they, you know, then we, you know, dig into something new. And our ambition was actually to change the language of how, an understanding of the value and impact of public libraries, and that is not done by one report put out by Roskilde Central Library in 2021, not at all. So I just want to elaborate a little bit about the next steps, as to my opinion. The first one is that we are releasing the design and the methodology for the study for others to use. And to me, that is a really important take, because it means if it's useful that other libraries or institutions of culture or library bodies can take on the method, take on the idea and the concept, and carry on new investigations and new studies. And it's not, I'm not thinking that everybody should do a study at this size to Danish standards. It's a pretty great study in library context. It could also be just with 10 citizens. But to grasp the main methodology and main design and makes it your own, to shape the context and use it to dig into the value of libraries in your local context, a part of the library. Maybe you only want to, you know, dig into the digital library, or maybe you want to really, you know, dig into, now be reopened libraries for 3 months. How does, you know, citizens feel about this new reality in libraries, or whatever you want to dig into? It can be, hopefully, be implied to much of stuff. It gives a guide to the impact compass, which I left out of this talk due to time, but it's our visualization of and way of of talking about different aspects of the impact main categories. Then we are talking about this. This is my talk number 43, I think, about in different contexts about this study. And I'm most days my throat is better, but I'm always happy about talking about this. And that it's a big priority to me to actually go out and talk about it, both because I'm loving it and I'm really passionate about it, but also because that is what makes this ball roll, to actually get the word out there and to raise awareness. Not hating that this is the truth or that everybody should do it, but I just want to open people's eyes that we can move on from the spreadsheet and expand the language and understanding about public libraries and the impact it has to communities. So there's a political arena, of course. I used it in local context to my political council, and it was just amazing. They are great and they like their libraries and they like me, I guess. But it just gave spark to totally new conversation about how libraries should work and what we should do in Roskilde Municipality. For instance, for the first time ever, one of the council members asked that this is not only from the cultural part of the city council. Everybody should listen to this, but this is also important around mental health, unemployment, and all these kind of things. So it's expanding their understanding about how we can use the library and the impact that the library can have in communities. We are going from lending out books to actually take what does it mean to different parts of the community and to different parts of citizens to actually have free and equal access to books or public shared places like libraries. Then of course there's library and cultural professionals. You are here today. I'm here with you. I'm using a lot of great energy talking to this, and I'm doing that because sharing is caring. And if you have done something you think is slightly great, I think you have an obligation to share it, but also because I hope that many of you will take on and be inspired to some extent and go home and talk about it and use it. And maybe it's just the thought of it, or talking a little bit about it, or maybe you're actually carrying out new surveys or something like that. Then there's a lot about traditional medias. We are spamming Danish medias where every different kind of things, putting out chronics and articles and stuff like that. A lot of things going on. And then we also have a take on what you could call soft media, which is, I don't know if I know a English soft media. I mean, that is plain magazines about different, it could be about, in Danish trains, we have like this free magazine, which is just random news and stuff like that. It's free. And how many rides a Danish train a year? That is many people, and they are everywhere. So to get a feature in there about the impact of libraries, not about the survey, but a study, but about the impact of library, that is, then we are reaching citizens that we are not reaching normally. This study is giving a lot of heat in cultural, in cultural press and stuff like that, traditional cultural press and stuff like that. But that is a certain amount of people that reading that. Many of them knows that the library is valuable, intuitive, but we want to reach different people, different arenas to actually talk about this. Then final point, I guess, is, and it's extremely important to me to shape this, it's to changing the language of the value of the public library has to be in context of the society. This study is not relevant in itself. It's only relevant if we put it in context of that society and those communities that we work in. So if we are talking about loneliness, increasing loneliness among youngsters post-COVID or in the middle of it or whatever, then we actually have the citizens' words that the public library is a place that helps shape communities and form stronger communities and togetherness. So we can use it in that context. If we find ourselves talking about the problem that social media is with the algorithms creates echo chambers where we all meet our own opinions, and it's make us unable to disagree or meet somebody that has a different opinion than our own, then we have the citizens' words that the public library is a place where you can get a critical perspective on life and where you can trust what you see and hear. So it's very important for me and how I use it that I take it under my arm and go out into the world and talk about it in the context of actually problems or opportunities where the library can be the answer. Last week, I was at the Vulnerable Citizens Council meeting in Roskilde Municipality, a council that focusing on vulnerable citizens in Roskilde, homeless people, lonely people, elderly, and so on. And I took this with me as a lifting point, and to actually talk about this is the impact we can have on people in the community. And it was just a totally different conversation that I ever had with anybody. So the context is really important. Thanks for listening. I stopped sharing.
Okay. Christian, at this point, you know, if we were all physically present, the crowd would go wild. You'd be taking your bows. You know, I think there was plenty there for us to think about. Now, there's been some comments there sort of picking up on some of the content. Franziska, I don't know if anyone came to you directly with questions.
Well, I see a lot of approval and enthusiasm for Christian's speech, but there are not actually questions that I could give on to you, Stuart.
Well, in that case, let me throw it open in case somebody's waiting to take the floor. There is the hands up button on the reactions, which you have on the bottom of the dashboard, and I'll see if we can, or Franziska might be able to see. I can see one hand already, so let's jump straight in. Stephen, do you want to come in?
Yes, I will do so very briefly. First,
you want to say who you are, even though we're going to see you?
I will say who I am. I'm 𝗪𝗵𝘁𝗶𝗹𝘁, Manager of Policy and Advocacy at 𝗓𝗶𝗀. And I was going to say, I really like that final slide, that final point about going out and talking to the Vulnerable Citizens Council, because articulating the value of libraries in a way that talks about these cultural aspects, it's something that the cultural sector does well, it does a lot. But the idea of actually taking it out and talking to different groups, because of course, cultural professionals will understand the value of cultural experiences, they will understand the importance of well-being, but it'd be fascinating to hear how it went down at the Vulnerable Citizens Council. How does it go down when you move outside of the cultural sector, this research? How do you manage to win them over and see this work as being important, this work as being relevant to them?
Thank you, Stephen. It went really well. You know, I experienced that they were not familiar with talking about libraries and how libraries could help vulnerable citizens in Roskilde Municipality. And that, to me, that stretches that it was even more important that I could open some pictures for them, which was not just about, we have places in our municipality that can lend out books and where you can go get some help, but also it actually, you know, on an individual citizen's point of view has some impact. So especially the part about how libraries help forms community was very interesting for them to move on, because they're dealing with people who are on the edge or actually outside of communities, has for some point fallen through the cracks of our communities, and they're focusing on lifting them up. And I think to Roskilde context, that, you know, it's wonderful as a library to be for everybody. We take the public and public library very seriously, but when we go out there and actually has to do a difference to somebody, we also have to focus sometimes. And it's just different to do programs about the joy of reading to a 18-year-old you know, normal kid grew up in Roskilde, a Danish guy, or somebody who is a refugee who grew up in a non-democratic society but is here now. That is some different takes, and so we talked a lot about how we could, you know, form activities and programs to reach out to vulnerable people, lonely people, especially lonely people. It's a part. It has a great focus in the Danish society, and, you know, growing problem and among all kinds of citizens, not only in the context of Corona, but also in general and before we were hit by the pandemic. So you know, giving, you know, using that as a door knock, saying the citizens of Denmark are pointing that the public library can help form stronger communities. And I believe that because so and so and so on, it just gave spark to some new discussion and some new pictures and some new, you know, collaboration patterns and opportunities for us to work through. So it was, you know, whenever, I think the context point is extremely important in general, but also with this study.
Okay, then, thanks. That's great. Francisco, I think we've got a couple there.
Yeah, sure. There has been a question by Cecilia, who is asking if there is a measure on the impact of spaces.
Yes, the space is a part of one of the four main things that we have been asking about, and if I had the impact compass, I could clearly, pinpoint what it meant to people. But if I, to my mind, dig down into the data and go across the findings, I think if you should be a little bit critical about the method, I think often citizens are connecting the physical collection with the actual space, and I think that is obvious. So there is some fraction or some overlap between those two, but they find that the space gives is very much in the haven part. It's a free space where you can come. It's a public space in community that is for everybody, and where there's no financial barrier about coming there. So that was really high on the space. But then there was also things pointing at perspective, and a space might not give perspective in itself. So I think that was connected with the collection part, or maybe with the programs. So but the library as a public space, public shared space, that is our space, not ours as librarians, but ours as a community, hold really high as something that we value together and that we share, and also that they might not use it. That was an important point that I haven't really touched base on. They might not use it, but they can still treasure that is there, because sometime in the future.
Oh, Krishna, I think you might have accidentally hit mute there, but let's take another question, and then I'm looking at.
Yeah,
Francisco.
There has been a question by Luke. He feels usage statistics are also important, and he wonders if you, Christian, have any thoughts or ideas on turning around downward trends.
Yeah, actually, we don't have downward trends in Denmark, at least not in Roskilde. We have, if you look at lending numbers on physical materials at a whole, there is a drop on national level, but that is because of the CDs, which are dying, I mean, and has been, going like this for the last 15 years or something like that. If you isolate it to books, we are seeing a fairly great increase in Roskilde, around 5% from 19 to 20, and on national level around 3%, which is not that much, but the curve has actually been turned around for many years. And the same goes with foot traffic in physical libraries. Even though many libraries do activities outside their houses, it has actually been increasing. So the short answer would be do like Denmark, but I don't know. We have been in Roskilde. We've been focusing more over the last couple of years on specific things. We have been focusing a lot about literature and the joy of reading as one of the main things, and which is also a thing that lifts off a lot of other things. And we have been not being cutting down, even though we have been experiencing cutbacks on a general level in our budgets. We have been not only holding our hands on the materials, but actually also been increasing the budgets for materials. So in the study, it also shows that is what is far mostly used and also more or less appreciated about the citizens in Denmark. So it's hard for me to talk about local context and how to turn around it. I think it could be easy to say that increasing funds would be a part of it answer, but I'm fairly much a realist, and I don't see more money coming to me, but I see that I have a frame and I know it, and within that I can do some prioritizing. And at the moment I'm very much sticking to the public library guns, which is which is very much the collection and fostering joy of reading and community through reading, also very much music, because Roskilde is a huge music municipality. And then whatever we can do around that, because as to me, library is about people, not about books, but materials, and the programs we do around materials and the scene that we set in libraries and outside libraries around that is just a big gun, you know. It's just, it holds so much impact. And I've just been acknowledging that for some time. And it's actually also, you know, this study is not about statistics, but I was so happy about seeing our books lent out actually increase. It was the first time in almost 20 years that happened, even those, you know, extremely library closure and budget cuts. And that is interesting. So I don't know. I mean, it's a great question, but we had to sit down and drink a beer, a cup of coffee, and I have to know more about your context for doing libraries. For me, the answer has been to focus on some certain things, and then maybe also, you know, why maybe also, you know, put it in context of how is it important with those numbers. You know, it's when I meet somebody in the hallway at Roskilde Library and saying, how was the program last night? She says, oh, it was great. There was sold out, 50 people came. Or maybe she says, not so good, 15 came. But why is that important? Maybe the 50 had a shitty experience. You know, maybe it was totally wrong timing or a bad experience in some way. Or maybe 5 of the 15 who comes had maybe changed their lives. So maybe that should be the focus sometimes.
So Christian, I think you're going to get a few people probably wanting you to take them to the pub to talk about this a bit more. But
I would love to. My throat would love a whiskey right now.
Well, look, I'm going to have to save your throat, but I will note that we've got a couple more questions in the chat, and Knut has his hand up. But in the interest of time, I'm wondering, Christian, if you might have 5 minutes just to review the chat and just see if you can throw answers in there. And Knut, if maybe you put your question in the chat, Christian might pick that up. But I'd like to move on and bring the thread with us. So once again, to say thanks to Christian for putting the presentation together for us there. I think there's huge amounts there. There's also links in the chat there to the work. So it'll be interesting to see if any of us pick that up.
Yeah, and I will just, sorry, Stuart, I will share the slides. I will send it to you guys. I will also have them on SlideShare. So I will just put it in the chat. In the slides, my contact info are there. So please reach out.
Super. Yeah, we'll also, if it's all right with Christian, we'll also host the slides on the NAPLE website, just so that you guys remember that they're there as well. Now, look, I'm going to pull together some great people now just for a little bit of an informal chat for the next half an hour, 40 minutes or so. We've got with us 𝗪𝗪𝗁 𝗪𝗪𝗁, who's the director of 𝗪𝗶𝗀𝗁. And, you know, Giuseppe has had a pretty incredible career, certainly working with institutes in the European Commission, the Council of Europe, and the EU Institute of Security Studies. He's also possibly one of the most published people on the call, I think, with 6 books and 100 articles in library and information science. Giuseppe, do you want to give us a wave and say hello? Because then I think you come up to the top of people's camera views. Stephen 𝗏𝗏, you've just seen in the questions, but Stephen is the manager of policy and advocacy at IFLA, and he represents us. He represents the interests of us, libraries and our users, when he's talking at the UN institutions. So Stephen works on things like the Sustainable Development Goals, copyright, human rights. I've been lucky enough to work with him a few years at IFLA. Stephen, will you say hello?
Hello.
Excellent, excellent. And you come up the list. Ilona Kish is with us from Public Libraries 2030, or PL 2030 for short. She's a library avenger. Some of you will know her. From our perspective, she's our diamond in Brussels. PL 2030 basically is based in Brussels and engages a lot with the EU institutions, where Ilona and her team are pretty tirelessly working on, you know, advocacy for our sector. So if you ever need anyone doing a favor in the corridors of Brussels, Ilona is a good person to at least attempt it on your behalf. And then we have Barbara Schleihagen with us from the German Library Association. Huge amount of experience. Some of you will already know Barbara. She's worked, you know, on libraries for many, many years, but my experience of working with Barbara has been through IFLA, where she's been on the governing board, many different committees, 𝗪𝗶𝗀𝗁, and now we're very lucky to have her on the NAPLE board. So welcome everybody. Barbara, do you want to say a quick hello there?
Hello.
Excellent. So look, we're going to have a bit of a freewheeling conversation, and we're going to talk about a few things COVID, and we're going to see if we can bring that impact into it. Colleagues, you've used the chat there with Christian. I'd encourage you to keep doing it again. And you know, I'll check back in with Francisca if we have some audience questions at a certain point. But look, I'm going to ask the same question to everybody first. I'm going to go with Barbara first. I'm going to go to Ilona next, Giuseppe and Stephen, so you can all prepare. But I want to know from your perspective, you've got in the rear view mirror now our kind of COVID response, and we're going to take a positive view that we're moving to the next part of this pandemic. What do you want to take forward from what we've done over the last 12 months? So what did we do that was new or particularly effective that you think we should be actively building into future services? So Barbara, I'll give that one to you first.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think actually what I find most important is the change of attitude of library staff. I found this incredible. I heard so many stories of people who were willing to take risk just to invent new services, make possible whatever is possible, and just get out of the box. And I think this is something we really, really need to keep. I found this just incredible. And I know that many libraries received many letters of thank you and gratitude. And this for me was really what we just heard. It was putting the individual first and making sure that they get their library services. And for us here, it was very important not to moan about, oh, the library is closed, but we try to say the library is almost the only place that is open. It's no longer there physically, but it's open for you on the telephone, digitally, and so on. And I think we need to continue to look at ways of how we can serve the citizens best.
Yeah, I think that point, I think we all came to a point where we all realized that the word close was just not in our vocabulary at some point, which is important. Ilona, what about yourself? And you'll need to unmute. There's always one, Ilona.
Count on me. Hi, everyone. I mean, obviously, like, it's been really, really tough time, but what's been amazing for us is that the strengthening of the networks has just been astonishing, and the way that we've reached out to each other, the way that we've supported each other, you know, certainly for our organizational level, the sense of solidarity, sharing of experiences has just been remarkable. And, you know, although we're all sort of desperate to see each other in person, you know, I feel that my approach to international networking is, you know, it's just been great to, we've stopped moaning about the tools and we've used them, and that's been fantastic. And I really want to keep that up. You know, we don't have to all be in the same room. We don't have to travel thousands of kilometers to talk to somebody. You know, like we've learned how to use the online tool differently. And given that what we're interested in is breaking down borders between countries and, you know, connecting people better, actually this has been a real driver. And within our sort of smaller community, it's just the level of solidarity and support has just rocketed up. And that's what I'd like to keep going, you know, is that kind of connectiveness and sense of shared destiny. It's just been fantastic. So it's been shit, obviously, but it's also been really great to have that. So that's shared
destiny. I like that. That's taking us to a whole new level. I like that a lot. Giuseppe, what about yourself and from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the perspective of 𝗏𝗏 was that when in these days of, let's say, between March and May 2020, that was really probably the darkest time, I don't know, at least for 𝗏𝗏, it was felt like this. Then we started to collect information, just as NAPLE was doing, just as IFLA was doing. And so we came up with a report in May 2020, and we titled this report in a very optimistic mood, towards or a post-COVID library agenda, because we were optimistic and we thought that after summer 2020, we would be all free and de-locked down. And that was not the case, we know. We are updating this information. We are just trying to see whether we are seeing whether this, the results of this report in May 2020 was where the results are confirmed, and in fact they are definitely confirmed. And we saw that actually libraries, public libraries especially, were moving in two directions: a more socially inclusive library and a more digital library. And that where these two directions actually are confirmed. I mean, the services like storytelling or like books delivered to most vulnerable groups of people, they have been going on all the time, I mean, for 1 year at least. And of course, on the other side, support to online teaching and support to online research and open educational resources. These were indeed confirmed. So in fact, these services, I'm pretty sure they are going to be to become permanent services offered by both university and public libraries, and in particular public libraries, and because university libraries were more or less used to have online access, but that was not really the case for public libraries. And in fact, it would be interesting, I mean, to know that 80%, 65% of the public libraries confirm that the traffic, the online traffic, has increased by twice or even 3 times. That was 65% of public libraries say that, at least in 14 countries. I mean, this is the update report, and even it may be a good interesting information that 20% of in the count, 20% of the responses say that there have also been changes in copyright contracts that they have set up with publishers or with authors. So I mean, there have been interesting developments, and I confirm that. I mean, the report is going to confirm. We are going to publish this report later, probably in June, but I have the results already.
I think we might touch on a couple of those issues further on in the chat here. I want to hear from Stephen. You know, you're working at that international level. What do you see us taking forward?
Yes, it's always fun to go last, because then I have to see which my talking points have yet been mentioned.
Have you got any left?
I have about 1.5 count. So I think that the half talking point is, I think, combining it based to a large extent on both what Giuseppe and Ilona said, the fact that the idea there being a barrier between those who can and can't come to the building, or those who can and who can't come to the conference, is being broken down. That there's no longer being this differentiation, and what everyone is experiencing right now is what people with disabilities, what people in rural areas, what people in care homes have been experiencing for so long anyway. And so we are discovering new ways to actually serve a larger population than we may have done previously. So in some ways, there is this fantastic opportunity to reach out further, not just to be for the 30, 40, whatever percent who come to the library anyway, but to go further. The other thing, and again, this echoes something that Christian said, we are now more and more seeing ourselves as part of this broader societal mission, that we have this mission as a society to recover from COVID, but not just recover, to do better. And so you'll hear a lot of discourse around building back better, or building forward better, if you want to be even more optimistic. We have a common goal now, which I think really is felt at all levels. And there's this real opportunity, and we already feel it in the library field, that how can we be part of this? How can we contribute? How can we answer the call? So I think those are the 2 of the things that I think we can hopefully continue with. So
we're getting echoes of the shared destiny, which I like. But Giuseppe, you mentioned there in the 𝗶𝗍 context, you know, that you've done some surveying of members. I wanted to ask you, you know, because Christian was talking about the work in Roskilde on impact, and we want to get a little bit into sort of like how we're demonstrating impact. So was there anything that you found from those surveys about 𝗏𝗍𝗳 members in specific that, you know, had a big impact for their libraries and that ended up being copied by others, or even if people started doing the same thing at the same time that had a big impact?
Well, the very first thing I would like to say is something that was felt to be negative at the very beginning, and that was not negative, and this is the financial impact. Many libraries were concerned last year that there would be a financial impact. In fact, one of the new normals we are going, and we are happy to do that, we are not going to confirm, is that public libraries will be affected. Actually, from the answer that we have received, there is evidence probably that yes, I mean, some 10–20% of libraries say that there was a substantial impact. I mean, that COVID-19 had a substantial financial impact on their libraries, but the rest of the libraries say that there was no great impact, or there was no change at all. And so this is already good news. So to begin with. Then for other things, I would like, I mean, it's hard to say, because of course the library, we have respondents in countries, and you cannot say that this particular library was affected and the other was not affected, you know. So it's hard to measure impact in statistical terms, but the fact that so many libraries actually responded, and also they changed attitude in relation to many other things, and I'm going to expand upon later when I will talk about the Unthinkable program of 𝗏𝗍𝗳. I saw that I mean, things are changing in public libraries. I cannot measure it in terms of statistics, but that's really my personal perception and the 𝗏𝗍𝗳 Executive Committee perception.
Okay. Now, Ilona, in Brussels, what I find interesting sometimes about our impact conversations is that, you know, your job in Brussels in some ways is often working out what funders there or the EU actually wants to hear. You know, it's the sort of the information that they want to get in. So we often have to sometimes tailor our messages to be reaching the points that they're putting out. I wondered, is there anything that you think that the EU wants to be hearing over the next sort of 12 to 18 months, or what do you think we should be showing to the EU? And you need to unmute.
So when we were doing the prep, that question triggers me a little bit in the sense of, you know, what do they want? What do we want? And, you know, for years as an EU lobbyist, we used to go, don't ask what the EU can do for you, but what you can do for the EU, you know. And I said, oh God, you know. You know, I mean, the long-term goal for us is to get the EU to think about libraries as partners. And the reality is that in the whole, you know, the EU covers, you know, the EU is not a direct funder of libraries, you know, in the ways that we imagine. So it's all about content. So the question is what areas of the EU activity are libraries best positioned to engage in different times? And, you know, the massive, you know, the official priorities of the EU are climate change and post-COVID recovery. That's what they've put massive amounts of money into. And, you know, much of the post-COVID recovery budget is being split out locally, you know, I mean, nationally. So they're thinking about that. And they always thinking about how can we feel European and how can citizens be connected to each other better? You know, and there's a constant anxiety about the attacks on democratic functioning within the EU. You know, there are countries in the EU that are really, really, really struggling. Maybe on a more prosaic level, the digital skills agenda is going to be stronger than ever in the EU, for sure, you know, because, you know, maybe there was a little bit of loss of energy in that, but there's a recognition that basic digital skills and a digitally skilled population across Europe is absolutely essential. So that's a lot of the work we're doing in positioning public libraries as serious players there and part of the ecosystem of providing digital skills. And the other thing that's quite current is There's a program called the Conference on the Future of Europe that's just been launched this year, and the intention for that was a really, really big citizen engagement process. And again, what we've been trying to do is say, you know, there are thousands of spaces across Europe that are places where citizens go, and we want to be part of a discussion about what Europe looks like, and that libraries can be places that can welcome that. You know, so, you know, but the EU does everything. I mean, you know, just so many things. We can talk about public health, we can talk about development, we can talk about employment strategy, you know, all of these things are, you know, where the EU is working, of course, you know. So the overall message is public libraries are capable partners for the delivery of EU programs and strategies. You know, and what you want is when somebody walks through the door and says, how about this? The library has a mindset which says, maybe, sure, let's talk about it, rather than, oh no, all we do is lend books or provide information. You know, it's an openness. And then, of course, the thing can be not relevant for my community right now, not what we're prioritizing. But then for that to be meaningful, the public library needs to know what its strategy is, what the community it serves is, and where its capacity stress points might be. It's no good going into a public library that doesn't have any capability in digital skills development, you know, to work on that, you know, but maybe really brilliant on engaging with the community around climate change, for example.
Well, I think one of the things that Barbara mentioned there earlier, and we certainly have experienced in Ireland as well, which is that tremendous ability now of the flexibility of the staff, and, you know, they're really picking it up. I think that could hopefully, you know, flick a switch, and the mindset that you're talking about there hopefully might change. Now we've got people on the call. I mean, it's amazing, really. I think we've reached nearly 200 people on the meeting, and I know we're mostly Europe, but it's EU, it's non-EU. But we've also got, I think, Australia, Latin America, North America. Stephen, internationally, that sort of, you know, same sort of question that I asked Ilona there, but, you know, you're looking at the UN, perhaps you're looking at the 2030 agenda. Any change to what messages we should be putting out, or any need from us that we should be fulfilling?
So I think in terms of the key themes, I think what Ilona mentioned for Europe, COVID recovery, response, and climate change are clearly the things that are really focusing minds right now. I think at the global level, there's less direct funding that comes from the global level in a lot of cases. But at the same time, then there's a willingness to put things another way. There are so many people out there, there are so many stakeholders out there who will claim that they have the solution to everything, that they've run one project, that they've run one initiative and it was great and therefore they've succeeded. There's a real potential in the library field to offer system-wide solutions to things. I'm giving gratuitous praise to you, Stuart, Vicky, who I know is on the call. Examples, for example, around Healthy Ireland in your libraries in Ireland, the work that the Australian Library and Information Association is doing with the Australian Digital Health Agency. These are a nationwide programs. It's showing that libraries aren't just great in one particular area. It's not anecdote, but that we can really be partners for more systemic change. And this is, of course, why NAPLE is such a fascinating forum for this, because you are the people who can think at this more systemic level about how we can make changes, how libraries can be partners, how libraries can offer scalable solutions to things, not just 1,000 different ones, but you can actually work with them as a system. The other thing, just to add in, is clearly they're going to be looking for value. And so the work that Christian's doing, especially to take this understanding of the value of libraries, beyond the cultural sector. So we're not just talking to ourselves, we're taking it out more widely, and being able to bring these decision makers with us, bring them with us in understanding why these things are important, why these are relevant metrics, and show them that stimulus funding that they're using right now, that they will have to pay back at some point, most likely, is well spent, is going to be really important.
Now, Barbara, you kind of had a a fairly pleasant moment, I think, during COVID, when the government kind of, you know, almost listened to what some of our colleagues here have just had to said and decided to make an investment in the sector. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and you know, how did that work? What did you learn from that?
Yes, so actually in these moments continue, I can say. It was only 2 weeks ago that I received another phone call from Federal Ministry of Education saying that they have now funding, which they call catch-up funding to enable especially school children to get some extra services, especially those children who were really left behind because they have cramped living conditions or no digital equipment and so on. And so there's a lot of money available there. And they phoned us and said, look, libraries can do something here. We are absolutely sure they can. So can we please talk about it? And this actually started last summer when the government released a huge fund, stimulus funding, 2 billion, and for cultural institutions was called Rebooting Cultural Institutions. And libraries were not mentioned there. And we immediately then had a position paper, and we, in this position paper, we made sure and clear that libraries are actually helping with social inclusion, with digital inclusion, with cultural inclusion, and that they are the places where people can go without any barriers and so on. I don't have to repeat it here among colleagues or all that we just heard. And we were successful, and we first got 10 million, and beginning of this year we got another 10 million to give to libraries for projects which further their digitization, which further also the education of librarians, which enables them to create libraries as third spaces, which enables them to make new offers, maker spaces, which enables them to start a completely new process of having, with a more participative approach, also all citizens involved in the further development of the library. And we feel that we are at the moment, and I think I just saw this also on chat, this is now a wonderful moment for all of us, where we can work on and say, this is where we were able to make libraries visible, and we need to build on that. We really need to build on that because we have a very important role to play. And at the moment, I think all major government, be on every level, be it on the national level, European level, community level, they really need support from all kinds of institutions to help recover.
So yeah, no, I think we've also been quite lucky in Ireland. We've had some you know, additional funding from our government, and I think that, I mean, Ilona mentioned the COVID recovery. I mean, obviously that's in all of our countries, right? So it's, if we can identify some of those sources and then get moving in those conversations, then hopefully we can all benefit from that. But look, I want to talk about your organizations and, you know, what's next for you over the next sort of 12 to 18 months. I mean, obviously we've all spent quite a lot of time working with the pandemic response, and now we want to kind of see what's kind of coming over the horizon. So, I mean, Giuseppe, in a 𝗏𝗏 context, what's your priorities for the next 12 to 18 months?
Well, I mean, the priority is definitely the Unthinkable program. I would like to say, because I mean, one of your questions was, do you remember any particular moment in the COVID crisis? Yes, I do.
You're taking away my questions from the end of the session here.
This is the end. Okay. Well, because
you can do it now. That's fine.
Yeah, I prefer to do that now, because I remember very well, I mean, early April, that we were having these, you know, discouraging meetings online. And I'm part of the Italian, the cultural group of the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development. And the spokesperson, the spokesman of this alliance, who is now minister in the current Italian government, the Draghi government, he said, you have to think that these are extraordinary times which require extraordinary responses. You have to think things that you have never thought before. And that was, and actually I had, on my phone, I saw a tweet of the National Library of Lithuania, and they say that they were producing face masks through 3D printers. That was so extraordinary because at that time there was, in Italy, there was a shortage of face masks, and every face mask would cost 10 euro, 10 euro, I'm not joking. And so I found it extraordinary that a library could produce face masks, and think what kind of service, I mean, they could offer to the citizens. But now I come to 𝗪𝗹𝗂𝗿𝗁. That was really the time when the Think the Unthinkable program were matured. And this is because we were thinking that also the European Union would change. And in fact, European Union changed because they approved the Next Generation EU program. And now if you look at the the program of the budget of the European Union, you find out that the most interesting, the most the fund, the item that gets more funding is cohesion, resilience, and values. Of course, you never know what is. You have to decrypt, you know, the European Union message, and you never know what corresponds to cohesion, resilience, and values. But if you apply this to structural funds, then you find out that this really is creating great opportunities also for libraries, because in the structural funds, for many years, I mean, the focus was on culture linked with tourism. But now if culture is linked with cohesion and social cohesion, then there is room for libraries. And we are working on that.
That's really interesting. I think the in Ireland, you know, that connection between libraries and then the big push during COVID with mental health, well-being, the general wellness piece, seeing culture in a different context, as you just pointed out. That's very interesting. Ilona, also in Brussels there with PL 2030, what are you going to be looking at over the next bit?
We are really focusing on the question of building democratic participation. And that's going to be a key area for us. There's just tons of energy for it. There's tons of opportunity for it. It's a really broad category, and I've been thinking about it a little bit in terms of, I think as a community, we've embraced the digital shift. We've embraced this notion of moving from collections to connections, the community space, and really see this as kind of like connections to 3.0 or whatever it is, but really developing the library as a space of citizen engagement and of building a culture of participation in our societies. And, you know, the idea is extremely ambitious and broad, you know, but really having a sense of everything from what does it take to equip a library to be really porous and to be really open and in a convener and an enabler of building society, building participatory society, building civic engagement, knowing what to do when elections come along, knowing how to host dialogues that are difficult, knowing how to be a vector for connecting citizens to institutions, policy making, advocacy, all of these things are encompassed in that idea. So maybe sometimes really political, maybe sometimes not so political. And we're getting energy from both sides. You know, we're getting energy from this. I mean, I'm always wary of when the EU, you know, wants to do something, but there's going to be a launch in the autumn of a community of practice around citizen engagement, which is really trying to reform the way that the EU connects with citizens differently. And in practical terms, what that means is that the EU gives a huge amount of money out in projects of all types, and they are building in requirements for citizen engagement in those projects. So what that means is that it's not just here goes the money to a university or a municipality or a regional, but it also has to involve the citizens who are affected by that community meaningfully.
Yeah.
And it's not just a program of information, it's a program of engagement and involvement and participation. And so what we've been doing is saying public libraries are the perfect place for that to happen. So, it's a long process, obviously, and then, from the library side, it's just like, where can we go next? How can we grow? And I see that comment from Rolf. Rolf, you know that you were the founding father of this for us, and I was talking to a community activist in New York actually yesterday, who we're going to invite onto a session next month, and saying, I'm still quoting Sherry Arnstein's Ladder of Citizen Participation from 1975. So what we're trying to do is articulate that. We're working with our network of libraries to develop some shared language around what is the value of a library as a public space? How do we demonstrate that we do that? And how can we show that the work that we're doing is building a open and participatory and inclusive democratic space? So it all sounds very grand. What it means is hosting dialogues, knowing how to have politicians in the door, speaking about the value that we have to our community a little bit differently, and engaging with policymakers, whether that be EU or local level, more intelligently and more inclusively. So it's long term. 18 months is just the start of it for us, really.
Okay.
Super exciting.
Well, I'm going to be a bit mean to Barbara and Stephen, and we're not going to do the good things that we could potentially do. I'm going to ask you, what do we need to look out to avoid over the next sort of 12 to 18 months? Are there any threats on the horizon? Barbara, do you want to take that one?
Yes, I'd like to start, actually. I would like to warn that we go back to a kind of new normal. No, we shouldn't. We should move forward. I think this is very important to have this attitude. And I can just, underline everything that Ilona just said, because I think there's a lot of potential here for the library. Because it's an open institution, and it has no barriers, and it's open to everybody, and it ensures that we are not kind of only in our own bubble. And of course, the other danger is that a financial danger, maybe, because and I'm not quite sure whether there is a lot we can on the whole do about it, except of continue our work. We know that municipalities probably will have a very tough time. Here in Germany, some of them have really old debts. They have a backlog in investments. They have probably to face now a lot of social funding they have to give out to people. And in Germany, libraries are still voluntarily services. So we are vulnerable here. But I think if we continue to show how important we can be, this is probably the way forward. So I would just say, well, yeah, we're on a very good way, and we should continue.
Don't go back. Don't go back.
Don't go back. Yeah.
Stephen, what about yourself?
So I feel I'm going to repeat a fair amount of what Barbara and Ilona has said. I'll try to say it differently, so it sounds like something new. I think there is a reckoning coming. We are in a happy moment right now with big stimulus packages. We see in other countries around the world where there's a more direct, a quicker link between funding that comes into government and funding that comes out of government. So already we're seeing in the US some huge cuts to public libraries, where money for libraries depends, for example, on local business rates, which have of course suffered. This is coming. I think what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to get even more savvy about the way we argue for ourselves. And this links to what Ilona was saying about how do we actually articulate what we're doing? How do we show that we're indispensable? How do we show that it will hurt if you cut library budgets indiscriminately? I don't think we can't prevent cuts from happening, they're likely, but how can we actually show it's not an easy choice to make, that you will lose things if you cut from libraries? And this is something that, as IFLA's New Europe regional division comes together, now, in terms of thematic priorities, clearly we're listening to members. We'll have about 2/3 EU, 1/3 non-EU people on there. So there's going to be a really good variety of people. We're of course we're coming into a busy field. And so it's really going to be a case of thinking about where is there value to add. But I think that one of the core functions of this is going to be, how can we learn from each other? How can we learn from each other about what's worked in terms of being savvy, effective advocates? How can we be both dreamers, idealists, talking about all the great things that life is doing, but also schemers, people who know how the politics work, who know who influences the decisions, when, what arguments work with them, what will scare them. I know it's really mean, but it's an argument that's worked in Australia from time to time. They make it clear, do you want to be the person who cut the library? Do you want this on your shoulders? And it's mean, but actually sometimes people react more to that than others. So learning, how can we share those arguments? How can we work together since we are facing this common challenge? And that's what we're really hoping to be able to do a lot with our new Europe Regional Vision Committee.
That's great. No, it is important that we have those mean tools. There's no, there's nothing to be gained if we don't have some of those in backup. Now, look, we've only got a few minutes left before I want to go on, but I do want to touch on something very briefly, just actually with Stephen and Barbara, just about whether you feel there's a danger lurking in the background around this massive explosion of digital resources. Now, I think in Ireland, we've certainly had to put a lot more money into ebooks and e-audiobooks in order to maintain demand, and we're very unhappy with the conditions that we're having to purchase those or license those things in. Barbara, do you want to say a couple of words? Is there something happening in Germany on this?
Almost. We were almost there. Today, there's the vote in our government, in our parliament, and they kicked it out last moment, our ebook regulation. But we keep fighting. We've never come as close as that. We used the momentum last September, and we started a new campaign for ebooks because we saw all over that the ebooks were really high in demand and the conditions were not really good. So we used that moment. We had a new campaign. We used the many libraries we have in Germany and the power they have, and we gave them master letters. They wrote to their member of parliament. They had the conversations, not only we had an open letter which was signed by library directors within a week by 1,300, and then we closed it because we thought either we move on now out to the public or we keep it at the moment as it is. And then we got already a suggestion for a regulation that there should be at least something like a compulsory license, and terms to be negotiated at a later stage. But what we see at the moment, of course, is that if a new book comes out, not necessarily it will be allowed to be lent by the library. And we found this is just no longer acceptable. I mean, we fight for this for I think 8 or 9 years now, but it was a good moment to prove to people this is what, to politicians, this is what people need now. The buildings are closed, they need to have access to brand new information in form of books. And yeah, we got a lot of support, really a lot of support. So we were almost there, but yeah, sometimes, there are last minute negotiations. We got something else now instead, which is fine. And we look forward to a new government. And if things continue as they look now, we will have good supporters in the new government, and we keep fighting until there will be a regulation which allows what the European Court stated 5 years ago, that e-lending is lending if it is under certain conditions. And this is something we need.
Well, we're certainly going to be keeping an eye on you because we feel the same way and we want to see something happen. So Stephen, I'm going to park you on the e-lending one there because I think you probably would agree with what Barbara said, and give you all a chance for a quick fire finish. I did want to find out what you thought the most interesting thing that you'd heard about libraries during COVID was. Was there a particularly quirky activity or piece that you wanted to share? And Giuseppe shared his earlier on there about the comments, but Ilona, I'll start with you first.
Yeah, I haven't. I mean, there's nothing that sort of really jumped out for me. I just think it's brilliant that libraries have been doing all kinds of stuff, and I just think that's great. Like the mask making, thinking about speaking to people on the phone. I think the phone stuff was really interesting. There's nothing that's kind of been like really surprising for me. I think libraries have learnt that online story time didn't really work for some libraries. I'm curious which ones it did. That, you know, I think last year we had a conversation with Tony, head of digital at New York Public Libraries, as a public conversation. And I thought what he said was really interesting, is that a digital or an online service, it doesn't replicate what happens in the library. It has to be different. You know, so trying to move stuff that was in the library online mostly wasn't working, but doing stuff that, you know, inventing different ways of interacting with people online was like really, really, really cool. And
Look,
the director of Cologne Library was amazed at how much of her staff became creative content providers, and I thought that was really cool as well. You know, that staff people suddenly figuring out how to make videos or record stuff or get people online was just really great.
I think that's
if something comes back to me, I'll share. But
no, that ties into what Barbara said, and I think I second what you said there about, you know, just simply physical to digital. That you need to do more. Stephen, quick one from you.
Yeah, so I think what I had down, and I've only got 2 examples on this, but it was opening up ebook lending to the entire population in countries like Austria and Estonia, and actually that outreach, that it's not just having the library card that makes the difference. It's actually using this as an opportunity to reach further, to bring new people into the library. So I thought that was fascinating. No idea if it's sustainable, but just this sort of using it as an opportunity, really showing value to absolutely everyone, not just the carded up population.
So you're on board with the Internet Archive's emergency library then, for sure, I guess.
I am, yeah, don't quote me.
And Barbara, you to finish.
Yeah, I really liked the story when I heard it from a school librarian in Montgomery, in Virginia. You might have heard it as well. She wanted to ensure that her kids actually continuously have access to books, and she was wondering how to do that, and then she came up with the idea she could deliver these books by drones. So she made a deal with the company, and she got all the requests from the children. She packed the books in special cases and delivered it then to the company, and they handled the drone deliveries. I thought, yeah, there's a very creative way of making sure books are reaching their people.
So now I have visions. You know how the military US drones have people in buildings guiding them? I think we need a room in the library where people will be flying the drones now. But all right, look, thank you guys. That's a really great discussion. There's so much more, particularly Ilona, you raised a couple of points at the end, which I think we could go around again on the hybrid models and the digital. Thanks to you very much then for putting this in. Giuseppe, I know you've got some really interesting 𝗶𝗍 pieces that you've mentioned. Please feel free to put them into the chat. Likewise with the PL 2030 stuff, because I think that people can then grab the links pretty much straight away, and that's really good. Panelists, I'd advise you to jump on the chat. If you haven't been looking, there's a couple of comments on there you might also want to respond to. But the time has come for us to take our destiny in our own hands and see if we can use some technology to finish. So look, everybody, we're going to try one of these very famous Menti polls. So let me have a quick look and see if you guys, Maeve, again, I'm looking to see if you can see my screen. There's a thumbs up there. So can I ask you guys, if you haven't done this before, oh, you're in for a treat. But if you can just go to menti.com, it's very straightforward. I'm going to walk you through it. I have Christian and Maeve actually as my 2 people visible on the screen. So I'm looking for sort of faces that recognize that things are going well. And I'm going to let you guys get in there. And then I myself am going to go to that page. So bear with me just a second. And we're going to go through this together. So now I'm going to take this code, pop it into my own screen, and hopefully you guys are already onto the first question. I'm going to walk you through what we're doing here. We put together a series of questions which are about some of the issues that we've discussed today. Okay. There's 10 of them, and we're gonna do them. I'm going to do them on the screen, but you're looking at them on your screen, so you're just hearing my voice, I hope. Now, the first question is about the highest priority for your library service, And we immediately discovered that the technology wasn't so good on Menti, because if you click select an option, you're basically presented with a white box. But if you scroll your cursor over the options in the box, you'll see a number of options. This is the only question where we've had trouble, so please bear with us. And I want you to, for this first question, select in your order of preference what you'll be doing as your highest priority. Now, we realize this is very unscientific and we don't know who you all are, but I want you to assume the persona of somebody who either runs a public library or a public library authority, and get yourself in the headspace about what you would be doing to answer this question. So look, I'll give you about 30 seconds here. And Christian, I'm going to use you as the guinea pig. So when you've made your answers, I'll look for a thumbs up from you, and then we'll see what we're doing. I've done this survey many, many times. So if you are, for whatever reason, following me on the screen, the answers that I might put in might not necessarily be my first choices. Okay, now for the second question, I'm kind of interested to take the temperature about where we all think we're going to be in September of this year. So it's kind of asking, you know, how open we think we're going to be. So in your library, what do you think you're going to be offering by September the 1st? So you've got your options there. And this will give us a bit of a feeling about whether everybody's able to offer all of these services by September the 1st, or if you think in your country, you might not be able to be in that position. So again, Christian, I'm looking at you as a thumbs up. It's not a super detailed one, this one. So I'm going to count down from 10, and then we'll let everybody move on to the third one. Okay. So in the third question, it's about the digital services. It's about the ones that we have here. And again, we're just trying to get a bit of a temperature on the sorts of things that you're going to be able to offer. Now, here it's beyond September, so it's really about what your service is going to focus on, because some of these you may not be doing, or you may not consider, or you may actually be doing all of them. So take a quick step on that one. And Christian's having a think. He's not quite sure. He's done it. He's good. He's quite quick, so I hope you're all keeping up with him. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. It's a little bit about library design. Now, I think it's worth pointing out that there's going to be things for some of these questions that you know, you're going to think, oh, my answer's not on there. Now, we're quite interested in that, and that's what the chat function is for. So if you think there's something particularly that we really want to mention here, please put it in the chat, because I think it's important to record it. So we're asking there how you think COVID will affect future library design. So you can do multiple options for that one. Okay, now the next question is very easy. It's a straightforward one. Will you give a higher priority to staff training and workforce development post-COVID compared to pre-COVID? Or do you think you're just going to come at it from the same as before? Or do you think, it'd be interesting to see who chooses this one, you're not actually going to go with that? So have a quick think about that one. It's quite straightforward. When Christian's thumb goes up, I'm going to move us on. Okay. So we're moving nicely here. Now, I think this one is quite interesting, because this requires you just to give just one answer, okay? So this is something about what you think the most important role a library can play in helping people recover from a pandemic is. So this will be interesting when we go to the results to see which ones we think is most important. So maybe give you a little bit of time to digest the list there and have a think about that. Christian knows already what he wants to do. Measure impact isn't on there, Christian, but it would probably be quite a good one. You can put it in the chat. Okay, so we're going to move on from that one. And then we've noticed in Ireland, you know, that we've got people coming back into the buildings, but maybe obviously not at the same levels that we've had before. And we're beginning to think about, you know, what we'll need to do to promote the services in the coming months. And we just wondered, which of these services on here you thought would need that kind of extra push to get people involved in again? What would be the thing that you really would need to encourage people to come back to the library in order to grab? So have a think about that. You can do multiple options on this one. And then we'll see what people think. Again, if your thing isn't there, then you can throw it in the chat and we might have a bit of a roundup and see what people have thrown in the chat at the end. Christian, you done? Thumbs up, excellent. And here I'm kind of interested because, you know, it has been a year of really getting to grips with our platforms if we weren't already familiar with them. So here it's about, you know, what are you actually going to be using? You could be using all of them, or you may have actually decided that some of them are not for you anymore. And, you know, if you don't see TikTok there and you don't see Roblox, then, you know, throw it in the chat and you can make sure that it gets mentioned. Okay. I did see a thumbs up. Excellent. Good stuff. Okay. And then we're going to go back to that threat question. I think here we're looking again at the priority here, the number one threat, the big bad. So what do you consider the biggest threat to your library service post-COVID? So this will be an interesting one when we see the results come in. So maybe not too long needed on that one. Looking to my man in Denmark. He's actually looking over this one. Yep. Okay. I'm moving on. And then the last one. Okay. This is the big finish. Going to give you a little bit of time for this because you can have as many answers as you want. It's going to create, you know, 100+ at least answers in the answer sheet. But basically, I'm interested your point of view on what new opportunities have been opened up for the library and what type they are. Keep them brief because it actually gets displayed as sort of text cloud that we can scroll through, but do put as many as you want in there. And I'm going to give you know, a good 45 seconds for this one, maybe even a little bit longer, because, you know, you heard from the panel and from Christian's presentation a few things which are kind of interesting. So have a think about that. And I might put an answer in myself. So 30 seconds left, I think, because we'll need to go through the answers. I can see a lot of concerned faces, people really having a think. So if we're lucky, this might generate us quite a few brief but interesting new opportunities that we might all share. And I bet if we grouped them, which we might undertake through the NAPLE Secretariat, we might find some interesting pieces there. Okay, let me see. Christian, have you entered a few? Yep. Okay, well, I think I'm going to call it, guys. So what we'll do next is, if you click to finish there, you'll notice that you can, I think if you see the voting results, you'll be able to enter your email, but we are able to actually bring you the voting results now, I think. So I'm going to stop sharing. And here, this is where we're at the mercy of technology again. Linda, I think you have perhaps the ability to share your screen.
Yeah, I'm just going to give it a shot now.
Okay, so obviously I've not seen these results, so I'm going to have to attempt to make sense of them on the fly. So we'll see what that means. So let's have a look. Do you want to go full screen if you can? Is that an option?
I'm going to try that now. So just tell me if you can see it.
I think it's coming. Yeah. Okay. All right. Here we go then. So let's have a look. Highest priority. Well, I suppose that's not so much of a surprise. Getting visitors back in. So that came out on top, and then sustaining the digital services. Yeah, I would say that's a big concern, certainly here in Ireland. And then we have events, digital literacy, training the staff, and then very closely their budgets. Now that's interesting particularly, as Giuseppe made those comments in the panel earlier on about, that real fear at the start and then where we are now. And then obviously nobody's got the pandemic preparedness plan right at the top of their list of things to do. So that's good to know. Linda, do you want to go to the next one? Okay, here come the dots. Many of them, so a little bit slow. Let's have a look. There's a pretty even spread. So pretty much I'm thinking that everybody seems, my takeaway from this, doing this on the fly, would be that we have, well, I can't tell if everybody thinks they're all going to be in the same place, but we've certainly got an equal distribution of answers. So I may have to sit back and pass that a little bit more, but certainly there's none of those physical services which are, lagging behind anything else or way out in front of anything else. So it's a pretty even split there. Interesting. Linda? Next slide, please. And then let's have a look at the dots in the digital environment. Yeah, okay, so here we see a little bit more of a difference. So obviously ebooks out in front, audio books coming up behind them, journals, magazines in there, streaming scoring second behind ebooks. So I've got a different set of percentage figures suddenly appeared there. So I can't explain that, but nevertheless, it looks broadly like once we break down that, they're in the same sort of order. So people are looking at ebooks, they're looking at the online events, and then at I did put film and music in there because, of course, not everybody's offering them, but increasingly we're seeing public libraries with the canopy option and music streaming services. So that's quite interesting. So, okay, Linda, next question. Okay, future of library design. Well, obviously not many people thought that library design would stay exactly the same. So we're looking really here at the interior spaces. Outdoor spaces also scores high. And the easily accessible pickup points. And I think that more space for social distancing, I realized when we put the question together, which we all did this rather on the fly, possibly covered by the flexible interior spaces sort of thing, maybe. So I think we could do some more interesting work onto this one as well. Linda, next one, please. Okay, yep. So I suppose the interesting thing for me there is the same as before. So yeah, about, 32, 46. I mean, I think we found in Ireland, we actually had a plan for a major workforce development program prior to COVID. So we've actually been able to benefit from the switch to remote and online and really get that moving during COVID. But we've also found that there's been a need to kind of address within that program some things that perhaps we hadn't thought of when we started. We've done a lot of Skillshare sessions on presenting of online events, for example, where we've had colleagues talk to each other about what they're doing in each different authority. So, we've certainly given it a bit of a higher priority. Next one, Linda. Okay, here we go. Yeah, this is one, the most important role we can play. So there's a pretty clear winner there. Space for meetings, events, and social activities. So really focusing perhaps on some of those things that Christian really was looking at, and the sort of the social impact of the library, the space being absolutely crucial to that. And then I suppose, the second highest scoring one there is access to Wi-Fi and work study spaces. So again, kind of, something that takes place in the physical building. And actually behind those two are services around online information and access to print books there, actually, coming in at 5%, but then it is the most important role a library can play. So opening up that space, the clear winner. Next slide, please. I don't know if you moved that on yet, Linda?
Yeah, I've moved it on. Can you see the what services extra promotion?
I can't, unfortunately, no.
Oh.
Now I can. Okay. All right, so that's interesting. The third space, something that Christian sort of mentioned as well in his presentation, something that's been with us a little bit for a while, that concept, but that's coming out there with extra promotion. So yeah, maybe there's a case of communicating the idea in the first place, but also, you know, the idea that we want to get people kind of back in and as a place for people to go. And events, again, scoring very kind of highly there. So that's quite, you know, of a tie with the previous question. So physical lending in there, staff expertise, digital. So yeah, it's an interesting one. As I say, you should be able to get these sent to you, and we might do a little bit more digging to see what we can find out. And then did you want to go to the platforms one? Let's have a look. The library website scoring high, Facebook scoring high. Yep, that would be what I would expect. And I can't check the chat yet to see if we missed any sort of platforms there. But Twitter not scoring maybe super high compared to the others, even below the municipality website. So I guess, you know, we know that different countries use different platforms and our users have different needs and likes in different countries. So I suppose not too much of a surprise there. Okay, and then the final one. Let's just see what we managed to get for this one. And I'm hoping we might see, oh, sorry, no, it's the penultimate question. It's the one on the threat. Yeah, okay. Now, budgets comes up quite high there. You remember that was down as a priority, but obviously looking at that as a threat. Patrons not coming back. Well, we've certainly been discussing that in some conversations here in Ireland. And the managing hybrid delivery. Now, interesting, maintaining levels of digital content doesn't score highly as a threat. So that's intriguing. I'd like to know a bit more about that one and where we got to that point. So it's looking like, you know, budgets, patrons coming back, and that sort of physical digital meeting point is of great interest to people in terms of threat identification. Okay, and then let's move to the final one. And then I think, yeah, I mean, it might be a bit too much to try and take all of this in. So it might be better for you once you have the results sent to your email. But let's, I certainly wouldn't want to give a comment too much on this now. I think I'd like to get a bit deeper into it once I've got the time. But already we can see a few bits and pieces there. Speeded up digital communication, a hybrid service, digital services, yeah, the fake news piece, digital skills, the non-commercial safe space, that goes back to our opening presentation as well. Digital literacy again, flexibility and creativity. Yeah, so much stuff here. Digital reach coming through, definitely online media, the library staff skills. Yeah. Okay, look, I'm going to leave you guys to jump into that one. There's a huge amount there. I can see you keep going, Linda, there's tons, right? So that's... Yeah,
there is.
Yeah. So Linda, maybe if I could ask you to stop sharing there. And then I think I did promise everybody at the very beginning of the meeting that we would ask Linda and Maeve to tell us the weather in Europe today. I don't know if you're able to give us an aggregated comment. Is it raining? Is it sunny? Most people are in good weather.
I will defer to Maeve if she's been looking at it more recently than me, but I think it's pretty horrible across the board.
Yeah, there's
grim winds.
A great spread of, it sounds like an Irish weather forecast actually. Cloudy with sunny spells with rain with some sunshine though.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well,
bit of
look,
blue.
it's not all bad, and I think that the presentations, I hope, showed everybody that it's certainly not all bad. There is something really positive, I think, that's come through in what we've heard today. And even when we have been discussing threats, we've also been talking about how to mitigate them. So look, I wanted to thank everybody, particularly Christian, Barbara, Stephen, Giuseppe, Ilona, for coming along today and taking some time out of their busy days to talk to us. Thanks to everybody who commented. And remember that, you know, you'll be able to find a lot in those chat links. Hopefully you can look at the work of 𝗵𝗺𝗁𝗵, PL 2030, Christian's work. There's loads of stuff that Stephen at IFLA's doing. So I hope you've enjoyed it. It's 2:04 here in Ireland. I'm well past sandwich time. So thank you very much. And Have a good rest of the day, everybody. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Bye.